you've gone very viral in India.
Yes, not that was the one that went viral was an old-fashioned, wonderful place where I had South Indian filtered coffee.
Yes, sir, in a
But I
restaurant.
also went. I also went to three other more modern coffee bars while I was there. It's something I love to do. I love to go to coffee bars.
Yes, sir. We have different coffee taste here.
Good. Yes, you do, and you grow good coffee too in South India. So, Mahi, I would like to do a short presentation, and then we can have a Q&A session in which everyone can participate. Is that acceptable?
Yes, sir,
Sure,
sure.
sir.
Okay. So, first, a couple of things about me to help. So, before you see this presentation, yes, I am a co-founder of Starbucks Coffee Company, but the part of my history with Starbucks has to do with the beginning of the company when it was only in one big city, Seattle. It was not a global company at that time. Just like your companies and your plans for the future, it has to start somewhere, right? When it starts, it's pretty small. So you'll see just exactly what it looked like. But a little bit about me that is really important for you to understand, which is I am not a big company guy. I'm a startup guy. And I have been my whole life. As my wife says, I never grew up. I just love startups. And so today, instead of starting companies, what I do is I help startups. I mostly coach startups. And now, because of Zoom and LinkedIn and all the wonderful tools that we have, I can coach people anywhere in the world. And I do. Let me give you an example. This week, I'm coaching two guys in Sumatra, which is pretty far away. And I just yesterday spoke to a man in Chile. So, it's easy to do this because the problems are the same the world over, everywhere. Frankly, the problem usually is, how am I going to get funded? So if you're thinking that that's your problem, that's everybody's problem. So I'm an experienced coach, and really, I couldn't talk to you about Starbucks in its first decade in the 1970s in the way I'm going to today if I hadn't been a coach to hundreds of people like you. These people have given me a new perspective. I kind of understand what my partners and I went through a little better, a little more professionally, because I'm experiencing it over and over again through people like the faces that you see on the screen. So let's do the quick presentation. It takes about 20, 25 minutes. So let's play from the start. What do you say? So now, can you see my screen?
Actually, sir, it isn't presenting.
Hang on a minute here. Let's. Have you enabled me to show my screen?
Yes, sir, now you're enabled.
Okay. So are you seeing my PowerPoint on the screen now? Oh, no, you probably are. Just a minute. Hang on a second. Let's get this going. So is it present now? Is that what I should push, guys?
Actually, sir, it isn't presenting. Wait a second. Let me see what I can do.
Okay. Tell me, please, can you see my PowerPoint? Are you looking at my screen, please?
So actually, your screen isn't presenting. Anyone in the audience are able to see the screen?
No, sir, it isn't visible, sir.
Yes, sir.
It's not visible yet?
No, sir.
Hang on a minute.
No, sir.
We'll solve this problem.
So if you are facing any problem, you can share the PPT to me and I will present it on the screen.
Yeah, usually. Just a second. Yeah, that's going to be our fallback position.
Yes, sir.
Hang on. Oh, I can't quite figure this out. Darn it. So I'm used to using, of course, Zoom, and this is not.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to send this to you. Just a minute.
Yes.
Mohit, how does your address begin?
So I will send you on LinkedIn, or you can send it eselhp2.org. Esel @
Hang on a minute. So you're going to send that to me, please? Patience, guys. I'm sorry about this. So I'm going to send it to your eCell address, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, hang on. I feel like an amateur here.
Awesome.
This goes to. Okay, it's on its way. So let me talk for a while he receives the PowerPoint and puts it up. There were three founders of Starbucks, and we were about the same age as some of you guys. We were 26, 27 years old. Unlike you, we didn't have any business experience. We didn't have MBAs. We hadn't been to business school. We were, in plain English, we were rookies, beginners. And this was a handicap compared to what anybody who's participating in an e-cell would experience. We knew less than you. In the beginning, the three of us started meeting. We were friends. We had graduated, each of us has graduated from college, and we had our first job. I was a teacher. My students were 13 years old, mostly. Gordon was a journalist, and Jerry Baldwin was he was working in a little tiny cubicle, little space at the Boeing company, doing whatever people do in those little cubicles. And so the three of us, like some of you, we wanted to change our lives a little bit. We wanted to do something that would be more meaningful to us. And we decided to go into business together. So we did what you would do. We started making lists of businesses. So we had 6 really great ideas. Only one of them turned out to be a great idea because we'd research each one of them, just the way you would do a college research project. And, we found out one by one that The other 5 ideas are just terrible, for us at least. But the coffee idea, that's kind of interested us. We thought we knew that coffee in Seattle, actually in most of the United States at that time, was pretty terrible. Just, bad quality. And what we decided to do was to research to see if we could establish a little roasting company and sell coffee beans to people in Seattle so that they could take those beans home and make some really great coffee, just like you can do today easily in any city in India. And there were some other handicaps that we haven't talked about. There was no internet. It's hard to believe, but it just didn't exist. So how did you do research? You went to the public library and looked at things on paper. It was really slow work. In the process of the research, how are we doing, Mohit?
With
Yes,
How are
sir.
we? Is there a PowerPoint yet?
Yes, sir. So wait, sir. 1 minute, sir.
Sure. Got a great picture of some of these things. During the research, we discovered that there was a man in San Francisco who had started a company that had a lot of respect. We read newspaper articles about it. And I called him, which is exactly what I would encourage you to do. It's like, when Mohit contacted me, you just contact the person you want to talk to. And it doesn't matter how busy you think they are. You contact them anyway. What's the worst that could happen? They won't answer, right? So if they don't answer, how terrible is that? If they do answer, something interesting might happen. Hang on, and that's a little more light, and that's what happened to me. He answered the telephone. Of course, it was a telephone with a wire that was connected to the wall. Hey, nice slide deck, Mohit. So
Thank you, sir.
this to help you, this to give you some perspective. This is what Seattle looks like on a beautiful summer day. Where I'm sitting is behind the airplane on that hill to the left. I'm talking to you from part of my home. It's of course 8 minutes after 8 in the morning here, and that's why I have this. The next slide.
so does the coffee you're consuming from Starbucks?
Actually, it's from another company this morning. So next slide. Okay, 1971 is when we opened. Next slide. So these are the 3 founders. You see what I mean? We were just 3 young guys. And there's no mystery to it. It didn't start as a gigantic corporation with billions of dollars in sales. It started as a little thing. And I love this picture. That's Gordon Bowker on the left and Jerry Bolden on the right. And that guy with all the nice head of hair, that's me. Okay, next slide. So when we started the company, we developed an image, a logo. It was developed by a commercial artist, a good one. And there is the mermaid that you still see. But the mermaid has changed. You can see it was the whole mermaid in the beginning, all of her. Today, you only see her head and the 2 tails that she's holding. And frankly, it isn't quite clear in the current logo, the green logo, that she's holding 2 tails. It looks like she's holding 2 plants or something, but it's what's left of this logo. So all that's left of her now is her head and the 2 tails and the roundness of the logo. There are no words in the logo anymore, and it's green, right? So, but this logo was just perfect for a new company because we wanted people to forget that we were a new company. We wanted their trust, so we wanted them to think of us as something that had been around for a long time. So we used an old-fashioned logo. This logo looks very much to me today like a cigar band, something you'd see wrapped around a cigar. But it worked. Today, it doesn't. The reason that the logo was changed later is that it doesn't work once you're an established company. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is the first store. Now, immediately because we're all conditioned to this, if you went into a coffee bar like I did today Third Wave Coffee, it's a chain of stores in Bangalore. I went there to one of their stores. It's pretty good, by the way. And you walk in and the first thing you see is the espresso machine, right? Sitting on the counter there with the barista behind it. Well, this woman, whose name is Jean Mach, she's standing behind a scale. It's not an espresso machine. Why is that? Well, this is 1971. This is the first store. And we didn't serve drinks. We sold coffee beans, and she's weighing coffee beans, fresh roasted coffee. And the bins, which you can see on the left side of the picture, there were 20 bins, and they each had a different coffee or a blend of coffee. And that was our business. And you might ask yourself, well, where are the drinks? What's going on here? Starbucks is a drink company. And the answer is that came later. This was our first store, very, very profitable. So we opened a second store and a roasting plant. And then after that, we started to gradually grow to dominate the Seattle market, not the world, Seattle. So let's look at the next slide. By the way, Jean Mach went on to become the director of sales for a few years, and she went out and found us 300 wholesale customers. Fantastic. They were mostly restaurants. So these are the three founders. Now, that's me on the left. I don't have that shirt anymore. It's gone. The founders in this picture are building that store that you saw. We've taken a break here for a moment for a photographer friend, and we're building a store. Now, why are we building the store with our own hands? You probably think that at this point we were flying around in our own airplane. No. We had no money. So the reason we were building the store ourselves is, you could all say it, we didn't have the money, so we had to do sweat equity. Today, sweat equity for many of you is writing code at night and on the weekend. Or, if you're in the fashion business, is making samples and doing social media. But there's always some form of sweat equity by founders. This was the sweat equity of the founders of Starbucks. Tangible stuff. We're building a store. Okay, next slide. Thank you, Mohit, for doing this. Okay, so remember, now we're back to the story that I was telling while Mohit was getting the PowerPoint going. So this is our exceptional mentor. His name is Alfred Pete. He died some years ago now. So if you remember where I stopped the story, I had found out that this guy existed. He was in San Francisco. He had a very well-reviewed little coffee company. I called him on the telephone and he answered. That's where we stopped a minute ago. So he listened to me. You can imagine this. This is a 26-year-old guy, never been in the coffee business. I'm talking to him. And I said, Mr. Pete, my friends and I are thinking of opening a coffee company, et cetera, in Seattle. And I should explain that where his location was near San Francisco, that's more than 1,000 miles. That's approximately 1,000 miles, 1,500 kilometers from Seattle. It's pretty far in those days. Today, it's nothing, right? It doesn't matter. But in those days, it mattered. So he was in a separate part of the country from us, which was important. So he listened to me, as a young man, and he said, there was a long pause. I could hear him thinking. And he said, Zev, if you're thinking of starting a coffee company in Seattle, I think you better come down to San Francisco and see what I'm doing and talk to me. So I did what you would do. I went to San Francisco and talked to him. I wasn't going to miss that opportunity. And he was very nice to me. He treated me like I was his nephew, which was appropriate. I was a young guy who knew nothing. He was at that time 42 and knew everything. He'd grown up in the Netherlands. He'd worked in Java and Sumatra in the coffee and tea business. He'd been in San Francisco already for 70 years, working as a green coffee broker, a good one. And then he decided, enough of that commercial industry. I'm going to go into the specialty industry. I'm going to show the world how good coffee can be. And he did. He opened a coffee store, then another one, then a coffee roasting plant. And he had the respect of everyone. So this was a big break for me, big break. Because for the next 3 years, we could call Alfred Pete and say, Mr. Pete, there's a guy who wants to sell us green coffee from Kenya. And here's his name. Should we buy from him? And he would tell us, he'd say, oh, don't buy from that guy. I'll give you the name of another guy, And he just helped us in every possible way. He even came to Seattle to visit us. And one of the visits, he didn't tell us he was coming. So he just walked into our store. For us, it was like having God walk in, oh my, it's Mr. P. What's he doing here? And he was very, very helpful to us. And he enjoyed it too, just like I enjoy talking with you. He enjoyed it because he knew so much and he wanted to share it, but he didn't want to really share it with anybody who was in San Francisco. He wanted to share it with somebody who was some distance away, who would be safer to share his information with. We all loved this guy. Next slide. Okay, this is a review. There's the original logo. Next slide. This is an important slide. That's me on the right as a young man. This was a publicity slide. It was taken by a professional photographer who was a friend of ours. It's what you would call content today, but instead of for social media, it was intended for magazines and newspapers. But there is a story here. This is the first store, the original store. And again, there's this scale that's to indicate that we're selling stuff, by the kilo or the pound. I want to explain that what we were doing at this counter is what you will do on social media platforms or on your own, through your own blog and other ways. We're providing information to customers. If you came in to the store, maybe you were attracted by the incredible aroma of coffee that was going out the door onto the sidewalk. So you're walking by, you turn and you come in and you walk up to the counter, and one of our employees, you wouldn't see the three founders behind the counter. One of our employees, like the woman who was in the picture, would engage you in a conversation. She wouldn't say, "What do you want today?" She would say, "Oh, welcome to Starbucks." And then she'd scoop up some coffee and hold it under your nose so you could smell it. And she'd say, "How do you make coffee?" And then gradually she would involve you in a conversation about coffee. And this is a customer education, or you might think of it as a information-rich environment. That's what people like on the web, an information-rich environment. And we used information about coffee to attract people, to keep them as customers, that is to retain them. We had a very high rate of retention. It's very important to the success of the company. And amazingly enough, all these years later, it still is important. When you walk into a Starbucks store, try it sometime, or any store, any coffee store, a coffee bar. Ask the barista a question like, "What coffee are you using today to make my drink? Is that a blend or is it a single origin coffee?" And they'll just talk and talk about coffee. That's what the coffee industry is like. Information rich. Next slide. Thank you for doing this. Oh, are we having science class now? What's this? Yeah, what's science class? Well, that's a chemical formula, right? Remember, you've seen these before. A chemical formula. What's it the chemical formula for? What is it? It's not coffee. That would be much more complicated. It's caffeine. This is the chemical formula for caffeine. This formula is why I had this sip of espresso this morning. It kind of wakes me up. I think that caffeine is a very important factor in the coffee industry. People in the industry itself, the owners of coffee businesses, don't talk about it very much. They don't want to be seen as being in the drug business. But, you know, caffeine does affect us all in a pleasant way, unless you have too much, of course. And it's important. And I think it's a hidden factor in the success of the coffee industry. How do you retain customers? What's better than this? You give them something that wakes them up in the morning or enables them to study at night. Next slide. Okay, we're going to flash forward now. So we talked about the founders. This guy was not one of the founders, but he's really important. His name is Howard Schultz. Many of you have probably heard his name before. Howard Schultz, starting in about 1983, became the company's director of sales and marketing. He had lots of experience as a sales director. Very effective guy. And so he came to work for this little company in Seattle. He was from New York. He and his wife moved from New York to Seattle, something they wanted to do. And then soon after he became director of sales and marketing, Starbucks sent him to Italy to go to a conference, and he was, as we say in the United States, blown away. He was just completely overwhelmed. And why is that? Because everywhere he went, like in the hotel lobby, at the conference that he was sent to, at the airport, there were espresso bars, because Italians by then were, living on espresso. And he looked at that and he said, wait a minute, the company I work for is selling coffee beans. That's really stupid. Let's sell beverages instead. We'll make a lot more money and it's more convenient. So when he came back from that meeting, he tried to get the founders to open coffee bars. And eventually, there was an experiment made and 3 coffee bars were opened and they were really successful. So at that point, Mr. Schultz, being an assertive guy, said to the founders, I would like to purchase Starbucks Coffee Company from you guys. I have backers, I have investors who will help me do that. And his timing was perfect. It turned out that the remaining founders wanted to sell, but they hadn't told him that. So his timing was really good. And he was able to purchase the company. And here he is. Doesn't he look like a proud entrepreneur? He really looked, this is a very strong picture, isn't it? I know exactly where it was taken. So he became the CEO of the company and immediately began to change it. Next slide. He went deep into coffee bars. That's the old way. Next slide. That's the new way. These are actually taken in the same store, but that's not the most important thing. Here it is. Starbucks has become a coffee bar under the guidance of Mr. Schultz. And it was very successful as a coffee bar, really successful. And by that, I mean it was popular and profitable. So the founders have gone away. Now the company is in the control of a team led by Howard Schultz. Next slide. This is a modern coffee bar. This one is in a Starbucks in Miami Beach, Florida. Boy, is that a beautiful coffee bar. Looks like it's in the lobby of an office building. So a place like this, just to help you understand how profitable coffee bars are, in the United States, if you have a coffee bar and you're doing, say, 300 transactions a day, sometimes 1 drink, sometimes 3 per transaction. After 300 transactions a day, you're profitable. So if you're doing 600 transactions a day, which isn't unusual, you're really profitable. Next slide. There's an even sexier Starbucks location, a big one. This one, you can tell it's huge. And this is a special elite kind of Starbucks store called a Starbucks Reserve. This one's in Chile, Santiago de Chile, but they're all over the world. There's a really nice one about 6 blocks from my house. And these are, sometimes the people in the industry would call this kind of a retail location a billboard store. It's really an advertisement for the company. It doesn't have to be this beautiful to be successful, but companies will open or sometimes the word is a flagship store. Maybe you've heard that in retail. A clothing brand will have a flagship store in a big city, which is designed to impress consumers. This is one of those stores for Starbucks. Go ahead. Next slide. Thank you, Mohit, for doing this. Well, there's some things that happen in the coffee industry that Mr. Schultz didn't anticipate. And that is cell phones, social media, laptops, etc. And why are we looking at this while I'm talking about Starbucks? Well, the answer is these things had a big impact on the coffee industry, really big. Next slide. This is the Starbucks app. This particular picture, it's in Japanese. I love that. So this is a person in maybe in Tokyo ordering their coffee from their phone. Wow, this is really great for the coffee industry. It makes the stores more profitable. It helps retain customers through, as you know from studying other companies, through the cell phone companies can really keep a tight relationship with their customers. You don't have to do what we did in the beginning of Starbucks, which talk to customers across the counter. Now you can talk to millions of customers and they think it's personal. That's really wonderful. Next slide. I don't know if this is the case in India, but in the United States, you can order your drink ahead from your phone. So you get up from your desk, you start walking toward the Starbucks that you want to go to, and you're clicking away on your phone. And when you get to the store, your drink is sitting in a special place on the counter. A lot of people do this. I think 13% of all coffee orders at Starbucks locations in North America are ordered this way. Personally, I think it works better for cold drinks than it does for hot drinks, because if you order a hot drink, how hot is it going to be when you pick it up? Not very hot. So, but if it's a cold drink, it works really well. And you can see more than half of these drinks are cold. So from your point of view and mine, because as customers of coffee bars, if you order from your phone, from your point of view, it saves you a lot of time. It also gives you a very important benefit that the coffee companies are very aware of, which is you get to walk into the store, you look at the line of 10 people that are waiting to place their order, and you walk right by them. You go basically to the head of the line. You go to a special place on the counter and you look for your name on your drink, and you pick it up and you walk out and you're smiling. Why are you smiling? Haha, because you were smarter than all those people in the line. It feels really good. Now the people in the line, of course, they don't feel so great, but it's a great thing. So consumers love it. Well, the coffee companies love it too, because it makes making the drinks much more efficient. So while the barista is talking to somebody in line about what kind of drink they want and what the weather is like today, they're making another drink for somebody who's placed their order online. So it's very, very efficient. Next. Oh, look at that. A picture from India. This is about a factor of business. This isn't really about coffee now. When Starbucks expanded overseas for the first time out of North America and went to Japan, and in Japan it decided, wow, English isn't widely spoken. They use a different alphabet. It's not even an alphabet, it's pictograms. We don't understand how retail works there. We don't know about labor law. We could have a lot of problems. So they made a joint venture alliance. Sometimes it's called a JV, a joint venture alliance. And they did the same thing more recently, just a few years ago, when they decided to enter the Indian market. So when you go into a Starbucks store, it is not owned by Starbucks. It is owned by a joint venture, which is owned by Tata and Starbucks. And Tata supplies all of the India expertise. Tata enables Starbucks to get good locations. It enables Starbucks to follow the laws for labor. There are always laws. It enables it to do a good job of PR. Tata is a very good partner for Starbucks. And also Tata has Tata owns a little bit of everything in India. But one of the things they do is they own coffee estates, coffee processing, that kind of thing. So they're great. It's a great partnership. But it's hard to remember that sometimes when you walk into a Starbucks in India, you are walking into a store owned by Tata and Starbucks. This is what they have done all over the world. And it works really well. Okay, next slide. Just a minute, I have to plug in my computer. Woo, that was a close call. Hang on. There. Woo! I almost ran out of power. This is the old logo and the new logo. Just for the fun of it, you can see now very clearly which parts were saved. There's the two tails and her head. There are no words. This is the same, for instance, PepsiCo, the gigantic soft drink company, soda company. You should look at their logo sometime. It's the same story, no words. They just over a 20-year period took the words out of their logo globally. And that's typical of global companies. Words get in the way, in Russia or in Indonesia, English words are a problem. So you just eliminate them as much as possible. Next slide. I just want to say that again, that's why I made this slide. Starbucks was a startup. It did not start as a global company. Next slide. Oh, that's a lot of fun. That's actually how I sign my name. So that is the signal. Oh, notice that if you want to email me, by the way, you can just email, it's my name, zevsiegl@gmail.com, zevsiegl@gmail.com. Also, you can get to me, as Mohit did, through LinkedIn. So would you stop sharing now, Mohit? Thank you so much for saving me. So I'm perfectly, we have more than 20 minutes as far as I'm concerned. I would love to answer questions and hear from you. I'm tired of talking.
So firstly, sir, I would like to ask a question about Starbucks. So why the name Starbucks?
Oh, by the way, it's a great name. It turned out,
it is.
50 years later now, it's really a great name. It's easy to say in most languages, which is surprising. and people think it has, all sorts of meaning. The most common story is that it has something to do with the novel Moby Dick, written by Herman Melville. There's a character in Moby Dick. I think he's the first mate on the whaling ship, the Pequod, and his name is Starbuck. So people think, oh, you guys are really great fans of literature. You've read that novel and you named the company after him. And the answer is, we didn't do it that way. I mean, in my memory, the way it worked is the company's name was going to be, well, you know what we did? What you would do, we had lists of names. While we were building that first store, we made lists of names. And finally, our attorney or lawyer called us and said, I have to file the papers. I need the name of the company. We hadn't told him yet. And so we had a meeting, and we decided, we took out our list of names, which was pages, written on lined paper like this. Oh, you can't see it. Written on lined paper. I remember lists of names. And so we started crossing out the names. This one's not going to work. That one's not going to work. And we got down to several names. And finally, one of them, there were two names: steamers, as in steamships. Steamships play an important role in the trade of coffee.
Yes.
Now it's all containerized, of course, but it used to not be containerized. Right? There was a sort of a romance about moving coffee around the world. We decided we didn't like that name. And the other name that we were working on was Starbo, S-T-A-R-B-O, Starbo. And in the end, somebody said, Starbo doesn't sound right. So somebody among the three of us, I don't remember, nobody remembers who it was, said, how about Starbucks? Oh, that sounds good. Okay, it's Starbucks. So we called the attorney, and he wrote it on, the rest is history. So the name, we did not pick the name just because it was used in the novel Moby Dick. However, we're all influenced by everything around us. And I suspect that there was a subtle, subliminal, not unconscious, awareness that we had heard that name somewhere, so it was okay to use it. And in those cases, by the way, you couldn't do a Google search to make sure that somebody else wasn't using the name. We just had to look around a little bit in every printed medium we could find, and then our attorney did a search with the federal records to find out if somebody had taken the rights to that name, Starbucks Coffee, and that nobody had, so it became the name of the company. By the way, later, when the World Wide Web occurred, the internet, Starbucks turned out to be a good name. And one of the reasons was, although it has lots of letters in it, Starbucks, people didn't misspell it. So for instance, if you take a name like Mohit Singh Chauhan, now you could misspell that, right? And then you'd have to find out how to spell it correctly so you can contact him. With Starbucks, you get it right the first time. So that was a nice benefit, but that came later. Question?
Sure.
Yeah, good morning, sir. Thank you so much for guiding us with your presentation. I hope I'm audible to you. And so my question is that you described in detail how that interesting part when you had to research in public libraries in the time there was no internet. So, sir, what exactly was your research like? Did all the co-founders have some background in the service industry to land upon that? Okay, we can even leave our jobs to pursue this one business idea. So, if you could tell young entrepreneurs like this. Thank you.
We did not have business experience. We had an interest in coffee, an amateur interest in coffee. So by instinct, we knew we had to do research. And once we found our mentor, Alfred Pete, he was our source of a lot of information. I can give you an example. In 6 months after we opened, we wanted to have a nice coffee roasting machine, and we bought a big one. This wasn't a coffee machine that you would put in a coffee bar. This was a coffee roasting thing that you put in a warehouse. How should I put it? It was the size of a small car. So when we wanted to buy that, well, this is 1972. Where are we going to get a coffee roaster in Seattle, Washington? There weren't any. So we called Mr. Pete. Hello, Mr. Pete. Can you help us find a coffee roaster? And he did. He found us one. So you can. That's when you have Mr. Pete was like our advisory board. I always tell young entrepreneurs, get an advisory board. It's easy to get the right people if you know how to do it. You get them on board, and then every time you have a question, you call them. And that way you don't have to pay for all the information. They just want to help you. Our research before we met Alfred Pete was with a lot of people and going to the library and looking at books and magazines and newspapers. It was really sort of like the 19th century instead of the 20th century. And after we met Mr. Pete and coffee brokers and other people in the industry, then we could do a lot more research. There's another thing that was not available when we started, which is wonderful. If you're interested in suppose you're interested in solar energy and wind farms, alternative energy. Well, today you would go to conferences. You'd attend as many meetings at the conference as you could. You talk to people who are there, and you learn a lot when you go to those conferences. During COVID, those conferences were held online. Now many of them are held in person again. There were no coffee conferences in 1972. We couldn't go to one because there weren't any. That came, sort of by 1976. We were, for research, we were kind of on our own, and very, very lucky to have Mr. Pete. There's another factor that, a question that I'm going to answer before it's asked, which is, how did it work to have three of you, Mr. Siegl?
I was just about to ask that.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
There are three of you. Are you still friends? Did you try to kill each other? How did it work? And the answer is, again, we were really lucky. This was not by plan. The gods were protecting us. As it turned out, all three of us were well-adjusted guys. That is to say, there's an expression in the United States, he's kind of a head case. And a head case means that they don't get along well with other people. Gordon and Jerry are wonderful guys. And, we're still friends. And that was a good thing. But that's not enough. As it turned out, each of the three of us was good at something different from the other two guys. That was luck. Just plain lucky. Gordon, very good at what's called market positioning. He's the one who made sure that we looked good to our potential customers, to the people who were not yet our customers. And he later went on to a career where he did that kind of work, market positioning, for other companies. This included everything, from the name of the company to the logo to the appearance of the offices and trucks and stores and everything, absolutely everything. Advertising, it all had to be one thing. one look, one message. And he did a wonderful job of that. Jerry Baldwin, the guy who was working in the little cubicle, remember him at the Boeing company? Jerry kind of blossomed like a flower and turned into a fabulous business executive and also a financial executive. It was Jerry who maintained our financial records. It was Jerry who did the forecasting, financial forecasting. At that time, I wasn't very good at that. I am now. And what did I do? I was basically the startup guy. I was the first full-time employee. I got paid, and I ran the development of the first store and the second store and the third store, and hired the employees, our HR effort. I was the typical young entrepreneur, and my two partners weren't so good at that. So each of us had an area that we were in charge of, and that's a miracle. I mean, because frequently what happens when partnerships are formed, there's too much overlap between the partners. So you don't get the benefit of having multiple owners. So the partnership was a very important factor. Very lucky. Whew.
So, sir, what do you think? What is the qualities we should see in our co-founder? Like when you said complementary skills, you have complementary skills.
Well, I'm going to answer that question by thinking about the experience of the hundreds of people that I have coached and mentored. Listening, today I'm doing all the talking, but usually when I'm talking with a young entrepreneur about their company, they're doing all the talking. I ask questions just like you are, and I listen. So I've heard a lot of stories, probably thousands of stories, and I've been doing this since 2005. So a lot of bad things can happen. The most common one is that, say two people, two women start a company, and then one of them has more time to give to the company than the other. And that gets worse and worse and worse. So the one who's doing all the work starts to have bad feelings toward the one who's not doing all the work. And it's not that the one who's not working hard enough, it's not that she's lazy. It's that she has other things in her life. Her mother's sick. She can't give up her day job yet. She has to keep having a living because the new business can't pay her. And she's, worried about all these things. So she can't work as hard as the other the co-founder who has the time and the support and can devote full time to the company. But you can imagine that they would start to what we call bang heads. They would start to disagree. I see that a lot. That happens really often. And it's a big issue. I was working with a guy in Mexico City, really great guy. And he was having this problem, exact same problem with one of his partners. There were four of them, and one of them was not doing enough. So we talked about it several times, and finally what they did is the other three partners had a special meeting with the partner who wasn't doing enough. And instead of saying, you are a bad man, you are not doing enough. No, they said, it's not working for the company. It's very interesting. When you start talking about the company as separate from you, then it gets less emotional. So they said, Pedro, we're working night and day, and you quit at 5 o'clock, and you're off in your favorite bar having a drink with your friends. This is not working for the company. The company needs you. That kind of approach. It's quite different if you say, we're mad at you, we think you're lazy and no good. then you've got to fight. So, in that case, by the way, this is a true story. The man I'm calling Pedro actually was shocked to see his three partners worried about the company because of something that he was doing. And he started working a lot harder. And so they did not have to do anything like throw him out of the company. So what happens if you are into a partnership and it's, we'll say, 2 years in the future now, and let's say the woman who is got to go, for instance, suppose she starts drinking too much alcohol and is useless at work, and she's really got a big problem with either, say, drugs or alcohol. Do you think that ever happens? Oh yeah, that happens. So what do you do? Well, you try to say, oh, we need you to come back. It's the good of the company. You should go into treatment. You should begin to release your life from drugs and alcohol. We love you, etc. Well, what if that doesn't work? Well, in that case, then you have to remove her from the company. But there's a big problem. She has stock in the company. She has shares. And this is a difficult problem. And for that, you need outside advice. There are many ways to deal with that. I don't want to take our time right now. But that's a special problem when you have a partner who has to leave the company and they own 15% of the shares or 30%, whatever it is. That's a big problem. So, but it can be dealt with. It just takes an expert. So that's about the question about partnerships.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
My name is Akash Yadav. Sir,
Mohit, just a second. Akash is not coming through very clearly. So when he's asked his question, would you repeat it for me so that I can hear it?
Yes, sir. Akash, can you
Okay,
type
go
your
ahead.
question in the chat box?
sure, sir.
Or you can also try speaking it a little louder.
Sir, am I audible, sir?
Yeah, you are
Yeah.
audible.
When you get closer to the computer, you are more audible.
Sorry, sir. Sir, my question is, as you said that you are the first salaried employee to the Starbucks. So, sir, how was that
Yes, I
feeling,
am.
sir? Sir, how was that feeling, sir?
Well, it was an interesting situation. This is a good example of how comfortable and effective our partnership was. We had a discussion, and I said, I cannot afford. We would say, okay, who's gonna be doing this full time? Somebody has to be full time. And I said, well, I've already stopped working from my day job. And, I was living on very little money, very, very careful. So I could do this full time, but I can't do it full time for very long. I have to get paid, at least something. And, Jerry and Gordon and I thought about that, and they said, well, we're going to keep our day jobs, the other two guys. He stayed with his work, and both of them. And they allowed me to draw a salary from our account, a small salary. And they, that was, again, it was for the good of the company. I couldn't do it otherwise. I had to eat. I needed the little money. So I drew a small salary. And then, let's see, after about 4 months, Jerry quit his job, the man who became our financial leader, and he went on salary and worked full-time also. There's an interesting story about Gordon. Gordon Bowker never was an employee of Starbucks. In the 14 years that he was a founding partner, he never got a paycheck. So why did he do this? Because when the company was sold, he got a big paycheck. his equity was worth a lot of money. And he came to meetings in the after work. He was an important person to the company, but he was never an employee. So sometimes co-founders are outside the company. That can happen.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, I have a question similar to this. Why do co-founders tend to hire a CEO to run their company when the company gets established? Like, why don't
That
they
can
hire the
happen,
CEO?
Shaban. That can happen. Let me think of a company. The size companies that I work with. Well, let me start again. That would be a situation where you have, a group of men and women who want to start a company, but none of them are going to work in it. This happened to me once, but it was on a very small scale. But they say, this is a great idea. We should do this. Let's find somebody to do this company for us. I mean, usually it's the other way, right? The entrepreneur finds the investor board members. But sometimes if an idea, like a venture capital firm might have an idea and they look around and they say, okay, nobody in this venture capital firm is going to run that company, so let's go find somebody. And they know lots of people, so they find somebody. It can happen that way. And it's okay to happen that way. So Shaban, if that's you, should I call you Shaban?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. If it happens that way, that's fine, because the investors, the founders, like say these venture capital people, they know they can't run the company. They have plenty to do in their own life. They know it's a good idea, and they give equity to the new CEO. This isn't a startup, and they give him shares. Now what they might do is make it so that those shares are actually granted slowly. Every year he gets more and more shares until he owns 10, 15% of the company. That works pretty well. I don't see any problem with that, and I have seen it happen. So Mohit, pretty soon we're going to have to stop. So I think I can take one more question.
Yes, sir. Saloni, you want to ask any question?
Good morning, sir. It's an
Hi,
honor to
Saloni.
have you here with us. So, in 2012, when Starbucks came to India, it experienced a downfall, and then it's been 10 years after becoming partner with Tata and Sons. Starbucks never looked back. So you've come so far. You must have learned and experienced lot many things. So what is the one thing that you wished that you knew at the start of your career, especially in India, where people have preferred tea over coffee for ages, and a larger
Okay.
portion of the Indian families come from middle class household, and we prefer the filter coffee that you just had in Bengaluru.
Well, there are multiple parts of your question, but let me think how to answer this. Good question, Saloni. Well, first of all, you're focusing on the product, coffee, and you mentioned that there already is a type of coffee that's widely enjoyed in South India, filter coffee. That's true in other countries too. There are, like in Saudi Arabia, where Starbucks is incredibly popular. There's a local kind of coffee, and
Yes, sir.
the two kinds now exist side by side. Western style coffee and Saudi style coffee. But that's not a problem. For example, one of the industries that's taking off in India right now is electric scooters. It's a big industry. It's growing like crazy right now. And that doesn't mean that hybrid, electric and electric gas cars are going to go away. No, they're going to be around. It doesn't mean that auto rickshaws are going to all be electric. No, they're going to exist side by side. So when you have a breakthrough, the former way of doing things never really completely disappears. They coexist. So it's top of the hour now, and although I know, Saloni, that there's more to your question, but I don't have any more time. So thank you for asking it. So Rohit, you are a real entrepreneur because you were aggressive enough to contact me and to get me to do this, and I think everybody should thank you for that. You're a real entrepreneur yourself. So I appreciated the questions very much, and I hope you have a good evening. For me, my day is beginning.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time, for your valuable time. It's very great feeling for us to listen you. So thank you so much, sir.
And thank you all for your questions. Bye-bye.
Bye, sir.